Okay, everyone, it's Dr. Lindner. We are continuing with neurology. And now that we've covered a basic introduction to the neural system in the CNS, and we talked about PNS, and we spoke about sympathetic and parasympathetic, then we talked about the uh, neuron and the classification of neurons. Now we're going to talk about the neuroglial cells. Now, neuroglial, when we look at it, it's neuroglial or neuroglial, and it means nerve glue. So in this picture off to the right, what's in the center is a neuron, and everything else that we see surrounding that, those are neuroglial cells or neuroglial cells. They make up half the volume of the CNS. They're smaller cells than neurons. They're 50 times more numerous. The cells can divide. In terms of neuroglial cells, we're going to talk about 4 that are found in the CNS, and then we'll talk about 2 that are involved with the PNS. And of the 2, we're going to focus really on this one, but these 4 are very important in the CNS. And now you know CNS is the central neural system, PNS is the peripheral neural system. So let's look at our first. The first is called an astrocyte. When you look at the word astrology, it means star. It's a star-shaped cell. And you will hear something referred to as the BBB. The BBB is the blood-brain barrier. And we know that there are certain things that can cross the blood-brain barrier, like alcohol. Alcohol can cross the blood-brain barrier. This is what police officers are assessing. If they see some erratic driving, they may pull someone over and ask them to walk a straight line or do finger to nose. What they're doing is they are actually assessing brain function, cerebellar function. The part of the cerebellum, not the cerebrum, but the cerebellum controls balance and it controls coordination. So all they're assessing is if alcohol got in and crossed the blood-brain barrier, it will impact cerebellar function, impairing the individual's ability to balance and to coordinate fine coordinated movement. So we also know that there are certain medications that can cross, or certain medications that can cross, or chemotherapy that can cross, and certain chemotherapy that can't cross the blood-brain barrier. And they try and trick it. They try and trick it by infiltrating the drug with glucose or sugar so that it tries to sneak in with the sugar into the brain, because we know that sugar can cross the blood-brain barrier. When there's too much sugar that crosses the blood-brain barrier, or sugar dysregulation, this is what we call type 3 diabetes. Type 3 diabetes, which creates Alzheimer's disease. Type 3 diabetes or Alzheimer's. Most students have heard of type 1 and type 2, but you can play around and Google around and read up on type 3, which is Alzheimer's disease. The astrocytes are involved in the metabolizing of neurotransmitters. And astrocytes are important to regulate potassium balance. Think of sodium potassium pump. Think of action potentials that require potassium. Okay? So astrocytes do have an important role. In the picture, you can see that it is the connection between a neuron and the blood vessel. So it's the blood-brain barrier. Now, oligodendrocytes. In a previous video, when I introduced the neuron, we showed you the dendrites, the soma or the cell body, and the axon. And what we're seeing here, yes, these are dendrites, and here's the soma or the cell body, and then here's the axon. Now, oligodendrocytes are going to myelinate within the central neural system. They're going to myelinate axons in the central neural system. Now, where did you hear about this before? Well, it's analogous to the Schwann cell. Remember real estate, location, location, location? Schwann cells myelinate in the peripheral neural system. So this is a myelinated section. This is a myelinated section. In between is unmyelinated. So oligodendrocytes, as well as Schwann cells, both of these are going to do the same thing. They're going to myelinate, lay down fat and cholesterol and lipids. It's just where they're going to do it. Oligodendrocytes will do it where? In the central neural system, and Schwann cells will do it in the peripheral neural system. So when we look at the myelination, right, this is the Schwann cell, which does it in the PNS. Here is an axon, and it's almost like phagocytosis, right? It's almost like this is engulfing the axon, right? Looks like it's engulfing it. It takes it in, and it goes around, wraps around, and insulates to create this myelin sheath. And what we have between each Schwann cell is the unmyelinated section called the node of Ranvier. Okay, a microglial cell. You remember in Anatomy 1 when we talked about 4 types of tissues. It was epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle, and nerve. There was blood, which is liquid connective tissue. When we talk about blood, there's red blood cells and white blood cells, and one of the white blood cells is a monocyte. Monocytes are always in circulation, but they become macrophages. A monocyte becomes a macrophage when the monocyte goes into a tissue that has an infection or has a problem, or it's got debris, or it's got a pathogen or a lesion of some sort. So a microglial cell is like a macrophage, right? It has a phagocytic role. It's involved in clearing away dead cells from the neural system. It's going to attack and find microbes and any type of cellular debris. A microglial cell is going to engulf that debris and get rid of it. And it's derived from cells that gave rise to macrophages and monocytes. Okay, I think the last type of cell that we have is the ependymal cell. This is in the CNS, ependymal cells. And ependymal cells, these are the cells that are responsible for producing CSF. CSF stands for cerebrospinal fluid. And ependymal cells are a form of epithelial. Okay, it's a type of epithelial membrane that lines the cerebral cavity, the cavities within the brain, and the cavities within the spinal canal or the central canal. These ependymal cells are producing cerebral spinal fluid to bathe the brain. The brain is going to be cushioned by some cerebral spinal fluid, as is the spinal cord. That's why it's called cerebro for cerebrum, spinal for the spinal cord. So cerebrospinal fluid, this fluid is going to go from the brain down the spinal cord and pump up back to the brain, and down the spinal cord and pump up back to the brain and down the spinal cord, CSF. Now in the PNS, we have satellite cells, and these are just supporting cells. Not much else to really know about them in terms of function. They're just supporting cells. Whereas the Schwann cell was the other important cell of the PNS, and this is the one that surrounds the axon and produces the myelin sheath. This is the insulation. Remember what MS is, multiple sclerosis. Whoop. sorry about that, multiple sclerosis, MS, is when the myelin sheath is being broken down so that it slows down the action potentials. Okay. When myelin is produced, it appears white. So white matter is myelinated. When we look to the left in the spinal cord, the butterfly or the letter H is gray matter, and what surrounds it in white is the white matter. But what's really interesting is that there's a opposite that takes place in the brain where it's the flip-flop of that. Whereas the gray matter is on the outside of the brain, and the white matter, so white matter is on the inside, gray matter is on the outside of the brain. But on the spinal cord, we have gray matter on the inside, and we have white matter on the outside. Okay, it's like a flip-flop. Gray matter is unmyelinated. It's the nerve cell bodies, the dendrites. Okay, everything in here is unmyelinated. Everything out here is myelinated. You're going to be reading up on tracks pretty soon. So tracks are found in the white matter. Tracks, they're found in the white matter. There's tracks over here. There's going to be tracks over here. There's going to be tracks over here. Tracks are really highways, neurological highways that go up and down, up to the brain, and from the brain they go down. They're sensory tracks and motor tracks. They're only found in the white matter. Okay? So when we look here at this cross section, this is the vertebral body. This is bone. This is the spinous process of a vertebra. And these are the transverse processes. And right in the middle is the cross section of the spinal cord. And you can see the letter H or the butterfly in the middle, and that is gray matter. Same type of illustration, vertebral body, spinous process, transverse process. Right here in the center is a cross section of the spinal cord. And since, just to give you a little additional info, right here, going into the back, that's our dorsal root. And then this one here is our ventral root. And the orange is our white matter. Okay. Okay, good place to take a break. When I come back, we'll get into parts of the brain.